Greetings and welcome to the next iteration of the First Church of the Presence of God. I don't know if I ever spoke at any length or in any detail about my meeting the man on the beach, but I thought I would do that, at least to preface today's recording, because it has a great deal to do with what brings us here to this moment. It was in the summer of '67 in San Francisco, and as you know, it was really going off then. And I was staying with three young men who had an apartment on Folsom Street right off of Haight. They were quite young, younger than I was. I was 21 then. And I believe it was right around my birthday, too, in August, a week from now or so, but I think it was right around that time. And one of them, Philip, was only 14 years old. They were the children of members of the diplomatic class in Washington, D.C., or their parents worked at a very high level of government. During those times, all the class barriers were broken down. Anyway, they were getting into heroin, and when I say they were getting into it, they were getting into it. The apartment was full of hundreds of pounds of marijuana and other things that I suppose they got there somehow. I don't know how they pulled it off, but there it was. Maybe someone else was storing it. I don't know. Anyway, it was right around that time that I met Charlie Manson, so probably should throw in a little detail on that too. I was trying to help them get off the heroin, and they had all this pot, so we had this huge chillum, and we were smoking an ounce or two at a time in this room with blankets over the windows. And I was trying to ease them through these withdrawal period. At one point, we were in there in the middle of the day, and the door opens, and this guy comes in, and he goes, "Hey, Danny," which was one of the fellows that was sitting with me. Danny goes, "Oh, yeah, we don't want anything." He said, "Are you kidding? I've got some real fine stuff." And Dan said, no, we're doing something else. And so Manson went over and grabbed the blanket that was on the window and ripped it off and said, "You want to face the day like this?" That was all it took. And off they went to fix up again. I won't give any details about Charlie's description or anything, but later on it came to plague me greatly because the FBI was looking for me, and they had heard that I had met Manson, and so they just assumed that Manson and I were, kindred spirits. Sure, yeah. Anyway, that hadn't worked. So a few days later, I had the idea to take them to Big Sur, to the beach, and we would take some LSD, and that would help them have a breakthrough. I didn't realize that at the time. I wasn't the pharmaceutical expert I am these days, and I didn't realize that LSD and heroin don't exactly speak to each other. There was something else that happened within there. Can't quite remember what it was. Oh, strange people have been coming up to me for the last couple of weeks going, "You want to go to a Buddhist monastery in Big Sur," and stuff like that. And I mean, weird events that I don't really have the time to get into right now. And so it was not odd then that I wound up going to Big Sur, because that kind of triggered in my head. And lo and behold, the reason that I suppose these people wanted me to go to Big Sur, if they were people, was to meet this man that I met. And so we drive out, and we get to Limekiln Creek, and say, "Oh, this looks like a good place. Let's go down there." And we went down there, and there was a big car of other people, I don't know, half a dozen guys. There was a young lady with a child, and other people, and they were playing music out of the car. It was really nice. And suddenly I just kind of separated from those three guys, and I didn't really see them again until it became time to go. And that was a long day. So I'm wandering around. I have the I Ching in my hand. And I see this fellow sitting all by himself, with his legs crossed. And I walk up to him, and I go, do you know who wrote this book? And he goes, I think a king and his son. Which later it turned out to be, I hadn't even, no, not even was asking this question. And suddenly he just rose to his feet without putting his hand down or anything. It was rather odd. And he went, everything's under control. Take the reins. And then these birds flew right across the sky where he was moving his hands. I did not realize at the time that he had complete control of my mind. Absolute. I had no opportunity to be objective about him, for instance, from his appearance, because when he rose up, I could see he had the body of a god. When I say a god, if you look at the ancient statuary of Shiva and some of these other gods, they have these like sculpted silhouettes. Well, he was like that. And he had this hair bristled with energy on his head. It was shaved. It was cut rather short. He had about a quarter of an inch of hair, but the follicles were widely separated. It was strange. And his forehead was huge, and it came forward over his eyes. And I thought he was Asian. I asked him, I said, are you Chinese? He said, no. And he kept doing this. And if you've ever seen a picture of Lahiri Mahasaya, who's on my wall up here, he looks just like that. He has this face like this, you know. It's a serpent. The serpent had risen, the Kundalini serpent had risen completely up through his being, and then the hood was over his head, and it was God himself, although, as I say, at the time I didn't know it. And I wandered about with this fellow, and he said a number of things to me. I asked him why he was not in the city where he could be helping people. And he said, I don't like being pushed around. And he said, I despise deals. And I said, well, you don't have to make any deals. He said, deals have been made. I didn't realize at the time he was talking about me, and everything was about me. And he said one further significant thing. I'm going to leave a great deal out because I could get lost in the minutiae here. At one point, we had gone off, in the forest direction, and had turned to come back up the creek, which was underneath, and it passed under this bridge. When he turned suddenly to me, and he went, "You're a celebrity here, you know." I had no idea what he meant. I do know that right around that time, I started going, I don't know, because that's what he kept saying. I don't know. He said that more than any other thing. And of course, I know now that that he was doing this snorting thing to cancel the thoughts out of both of our heads, because there's only one mind. And I later on saw the reality of this, because a few months later, after many an adventure, some of which involved my being locked up while these immense changes were happening, because he had touched me and he had passed what's called Shaktipat to me. So it was even then working in my system. I was suddenly finally back in Washington, D.C., and I was in DuPont Circle, which is where I was localized around. And John Hall showed up. He later put together the band Orleans. And he was with the drummer, Jack O'Connor, and a few other people. And he said, "Hey, Terry Jones, who moved to Canada to evade the draft and later became a pretty famous folk singer, he was out of town, and his father, a colonel in the military, had this nice cabin in the woods, and he had given John the okay to go out there and use it to take a psychedelic trip in. And so he had plenty of really good LSD, and I was always up for that. And here I have to add in a caveat. It says in many of the ancient traditional texts that intense psychedelics, certain comestibles, can trigger spiritual experiences. It's not recommended, not a good idea. If it happens to you, it can be egregious, as it did turn out for me and many times along the way to this moment we're in. Yeah. However, that's neither here nor there. So we all took off and went out to Virginia. And it was a really nice cabin in the woods. And I remember we were all had come onto the LSD, and I was having this very strange sensation. I was looking over, I was going, something's not right. What's going on? And I noticed there were all these pictures of knights on the wall from the 15th, 16th century, whenever, maybe earlier. And they were all changing into Eastern motifs. Everything that was Western was suddenly becoming Eastern. I was going, the heck? And so then I sat down, and John was playing this raga-like sound on the guitar. And his energy was starting to move in my body. Whoa, it was something. And then I saw my hands started to come up like this into these, both of them moving like this. That were mudras. I didn't know anything about this at the time. I knew nothing about Asian philosophy. I knew less than I thought I knew about Western traditions. However, I didn't know anything about the Eastern stuff, and I was flipping because I thought there was a witch in the room, and I thought I was being bewitched. But at a certain point, it just became overwhelming and so powerful. I went, oh, Lord, I just have to trust you here. I'm just going to let it go, because I was resisting. I was fighting with all my... And I let go. And all this energy just went straight up. And the me that had existed up to that time was washed right out of me. Didn't exist anymore. But I could feel everyone else, that's for sure. And I looked at my hand, was going like this. My hands had then come together like this, the way the man on the beach had his. And I was going like this. And all these red devils appeared in the carpet below me with their backs bent before me. And I realized later on that I had mastering all the passions within myself. They were externalized this way for the mind's view. And then I felt John's mind intensely. I was right inside his mind. And he went, oh, and he was pushing and shoving. But there was no way to force me out of his mind, because there's only one mind. And that flipped him out. And then I could see this energy that was coming off of me. It was making everyone uncomfortable. A couple of guys had left and gone into the kitchen. They couldn't take it. And for some reason, I got up and walked in there. And they're both standing over at the far side of the room looking at me going, So I don't know what caused this, but I went like this with my hand. And the guy's feet went right out from under him. And I went, what the? So I thought I'd better get out of here. And I went outside, but it's in the middle of the woods. And I walked around the house, and I went out into where the yard was. There was a lawn there. And to my left, I saw 5 golden cobras, serpents, raised about, they were up like this, with their hoods about 3 feet off the air, and they were holographic. You could see right through them. And they were golden. There was 5 of them. I later realized that was the spiritualization of the senses. And then off to my right were 6 green cats. And they were in profile, facing that way. Well, it would actually be this way. Yeah, everything's reversed here in this mirror effect video. And I've never been great at that sort of a thing. Anyway, these cats, they were in profile. The side view, okay. And they had the number 9 in them. There were 6 of them. And I put together later on what all that kind of meant too. That was the sensual life, the physical, the material, the carnal, but merged with the spiritual. So serpents and cats. Later on, I realized that this went back through so many traditions. And I started to walk, and when my feet hit the ground, the whole earth shook. I could feel it. It was like, holy shit. A lot happened out there at that time. Creatures from many dimensions started appearing out of the forest. And I'd taken a considerable amount of LSD in my time. I know the difference between hallucination and vision and any other thing that may come along. I was an experienced trooper at this point. Anyway, I was out there for a while, and the things that were happening. Then I came inside, and I went up, and I started looking in the mirror. And my face kept changing, and all these different faces. And later on, it occurred to me, too, that these were my various lifetimes, my personas from these lifetimes. And I was in Egypt. I closed my eyes at one point, and I was inside this place underneath the paws of the Sphinx. And there was Egyptian hieroglyphs all over the wall, and it was all lit with a golden light. And I was in an initiation chamber. I never got any more details about that. And then I came back downstairs, and everyone was freaking out. This was extremely powerful. This wasn't like a small time thing. It was like the whole house shook, I heard later. The energies were off the charts, and everybody wanted to get out of there and back to town as soon as possible. So, yeah, we're all in agreement. And so I sat in the back between two other guys, and John was up front. I mean, I think John might have been driving, and someone else was next to him. And not a word got said. We were 75 miles outside of D.C. in the Virginia countryside. Not a single word got said. And they drove up to DuPont Circle. They opened the door. It was pretty obvious, and I was out, and they were gone. And my life's been kind of strange like that ever since. And this was the Kundalini action that came out. And for several years after this, I was in a state of just, well, dynamic tension is the only way that I can describe it. And through that entire winter that followed, I would stand in Georgetown outside of People's Drug Store. It was on, I think, Wisconsin Avenue. There was nothing but a vest and a shirt. And I just got used to that. I never wore a jacket in the winter. But I had this breathing techniques that happened automatically, and it was never cold. So I went through this. Well, my life was not my own after that, and I was put through all these different things. Some of them were unpleasant for me and for other people who had to live with it, because you see, everyone's trying to live a normal life. And when something comes into that life that's not normal, it creates tension between people's perceived ideas of what's normal and their own state of normality or seemingly normal, yada, yada, yada. So I was always something of an unwelcome guest in many ways, because I brought these forces with me. Well, now the time has come when the whole world is about to go through similar changes. Or, if you'll allow it. If you won't, that's going to be unfortunate for you, because there is no resisting this power. I speak from direct experience. And this pulse that I have spoken of, it's emerging from the mind of God. It's impacting upon the waters of human consciousness. It's creating waves. Now, these are major waves. When they hit any of the individual representations of consciousness, it's going to be noticeable. Just like if you were in the water and you got hit by a big wave, only this happens inside your head. This is going to happen, is happening. And I don't know if you've noticed that people are getting stranger and stranger at every level of society. And some are being driven mad, and some are coming to their senses. But nothing has really hit yet, not like it's going to. And then, well, you better be prepared. No, I wasn't prepared for what happened to me, but I knew to go along with it, as anyone would when the power is so overwhelming. I know now all power comes from God. And I know now that this was a spiritual transformation. But at the time I didn't, so I had to trust. And this is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to trust God. Let me see. Got to check the time. It was, going on here. And I didn't mean for it to get away from me. But then I didn't mean for my life to get away from me either, did I? Oh, my friends. It's about to go off. And so it's my job to tell you this so that you can just at least trust God. I can tell you for sure God's there. And I can tell you for sure. And on my life and on my soul, place it, okay? Make me responsible for it. However, God is real. And where is God? God's not external, except in the formation of the Divine Mother, because there's the pulse and the wave. There is the internal reality of existence, and there's external reality, and the three forces that move through it: intelligence, force, and matter, which composes the entire world we live in. This changes occasionally. Oh, it changes in big and small ways over the course of thousands of years, but there come times when it changes dramatically, and these changes always come about through changes in the consciousness of the people who are present. They're the people that are lifted up by the wave because they allow it, and it transforms and changes them and makes them representative of a new race of humanity with new powers of awareness, and I could go on and on. Fortunately, I have time constraints. Anyway, this is going to happen. And so you want to just trust God, because where is God? God is inside you. Right this moment, God is looking through your eyes. Right this moment, God is listening through your ears, and God is thinking, analyzing, and sorting things up in your personalized consciousness. He's witnessing all of this while you are doing all of this, because you imagine yourself still separate from everyone else and everything else, and you're not. Now, how it is that that is true will be later on explained to you. But for the moment, the important thing to remember is that when strange experiences start happening inside you and stuff you can't figure out starts happening, and because you don't know what it is, it makes you apprehensive and creates fear in you, which generates doubt, and everything's connected that way too. When this begins to happen, just trust God. And I'll tell you what he tells me. Visible, I'm handling everything. Just rely on me. Just rely on me. And have I not shown you time after time that this is true? Why are you still doubting me? Yes, it's the mind, Visible. So who are you going to listen to? Your own mind that's fighting for survival, in which I'm about to clarify for it, or me, who've been here since the beginning of time and way before that? Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. Anyway, my friends, I think this has gone on for a bit here, so I hope that this will prove useful to some of you, and may God's blessings flow profoundly within and upon you from whatever direction they come. May God bless you, give you peace, and contain you in the sanctuary of his love. Thank you, my friends. Whoop-de-doo.